Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Grace, and this is the KMG Show for Monday, November the 16th, 2020. I have a tech update for you. This arrived a couple of hours ago, too late to do anything with before this show, but it's a lighting rig with various attachments. I think I'm going to have to get something to attach to the table, an arm, so I can have all this stuff at the top. But I should have that within the week. So things are looking up, tech-wise, performance-wise. Kind words from Head McNeck and Dan Ellison. Thanks so much. I want to talk about the hammer, which is a term that I was introduced to in a new context a few days ago, and it has to do with COVID-19. And it strikes me that we're told that COVID is a respiratory disease, but it is clearly a respiratory disease, but it is also something else. It is a brain parasite as well, because or the thought of it, the fear of it, gets into people's brains or their minds. I know, not quite the same thing. And it drives them insane. And it drives them to demand hair-raising policy measures. Before I get into that specifically, as far as COVID goes, let's get the latest hysteria from the Drudge Report. Big unknown. Where are people getting infected? Rural towns worse than cities. New vax, 94.5% effective. Drudge poll. Will you take? Dangerous race. So I had rather thought that the COVID hysteria might level off if Biden was seen to be ahead in the race. That has not happened. Clearly, this is going to be pushed until, January the 20th. And if Trump gets a second term, as I believe that he will, then the hysteria, it'll be ramped up again. But as I predicted last week, if Trump becomes president, his plan is clearly to reopen the United States. And I suppose, states like California, New York, New Jersey, they can make life much, much worse for their own people. Michigan, of course, where Governor Shiny Face is in charge. Let's see how long they can keep that up. Okay, in my own country of Canada, story from Alberta, Kenney, that's Jason Kenney, the Premier of Alberta, an old friend of mine, warns stronger measures could be in store for Alberta as COVID-19 cases rise by 991 Sunday. As this is from Global News, as Alberta confirmed 991 additional cases of COVID-19 Sunday, as well as 6 additional deaths. Premier Kenney warned that the government would implement stronger rules if Albertans fail to follow public health recommendations. On the Roy Green Show, he said, Alberta really has a culture of what I call responsible freedom. We managed to get through the first 7 or 8 months of COVID period with lower levels of infections, hospitalizations, and COVID deaths than the other large provinces. But apparently getting a little slack there in Alberta. Sunday's 6 deaths, all of which were linked to outbreaks at continuing care centers or hospitals. And this is one of the big scandals of COVID-19 in the United States and in Canada, is the deplorable job continuing care centers and hospitals have done in protecting the most vulnerable. Let's see, a man in his 90s in connection with the outbreak at Foothills Medical Center in Calgary died. The other 5 deaths were all in Edmonton, including 3 linked to the outbreak at the Edmonton General Care Center, a man and woman in their 80s and a woman in her 90s, a woman in her 60s at the Misericordia Community Hospital, and a woman in her 90s at South Terrace Continuing Care also passed away. So the numbers that we're getting here are the same as we were getting right from the very beginning. The average death would be 82, 84, something like that. Jason Kenney said that voluntary measures currently in place that ask Albertans to avoid social gatherings at home, as well as the new orders that have canceled group fitness classes and changed rules around liquor sales and closing times for bars and restaurants, should be adhered to. These are relatively modest measures, and I really hope that people respond positively, he said. If we continue to see evidence of large at-home parties, typically involving younger people trying to blow off steam, we may have to start enforcing the public health order, bringing in an actual order instead of a recommendation against at-home socializing, with that being our largest vector of transmission. He added the province is canceling thousands of non-urgent surgeries and moving more and more patients out of hospitals to make way for COVID-19 patients. Well, yes, your idea of a non-urgent surgery, Premier Kenney, might be a little different from the person who's actually getting the surgery. Yeah, cancer, heart disease, blood clots, and COVID. This is not a political argument. This is not an abstraction. This is a reality, he said. If you have a friend or relative who's on the surgical wait list or needs non-urgent medical care, they are being negatively affected by the growth of the virus in Alberta, so we may have to take stronger measures if people do not respond. No, they are being negatively affected by the growth of panic in Alberta. We're not going to enforce our way out of this. We're not going to turn Alberta into a police state, Kenney said. Well, we'll have to wait and see about that, won't we? If we're not going to enforce our way out of this, then why are all of these rules? Why do the rules exist? Kenney wants it both ways. He wants to lock people down. He wants to eliminate normal life, but no, it's not a police state. Let's get to the hammer specifically now. And a man called Dr. Abdu Sharkawi. And what do we know about this fellow? Have we heard anything about him previously which might reflect on what he's saying now? This is what Dr. Sharkawi posted on Facebook on March the 5th of this year. I'm a doctor and an infectious diseases specialist. I've been at this for more than 20 years and seeing sick patients on a daily basis. I have worked in inner city hospitals and in the poor slums of Africa. HIV, AIDS, hepatitis, TB, SARS, measles, shingles, whooping cough, diphtheria. There is little I haven't been exposed to in my profession. And with the notable exception of SARS, very little has left me feeling vulnerable, overwhelmed, or downright scared. I am not scared of COVID-19. I am concerned about the implications of a novel infectious agent that has spread the world over and continues to find new footholds in different soil. I'm rightly concerned for the welfare of those who are elderly, in frail health, or disenfranchised, who stand to suffer mostly and disproportionately at the hands of this new scourge, but I'm not afraid of COVID-19. So we see that Dr. Sharkawi was rather sensible back in March. But things have changed. This is from Rachel Aiello at CTV News. After a week of record high case counts in several provinces and a series of regionally specific adjustments to public health restrictions, CTV infectious health disease specialist. Oh, so he's on TV. He's a regular on TV. And I guess if you're not going to panic, then they're not going to put you on TV, are they? Dr. Sharkawi now thinks the time has come for a uniform national approach to get the second wave of COVID-19 under control. We're in a pretty dire situation right now. I think it is becoming abundantly clear this is a nationwide crisis. He said in an interview on CTV's Question Period, we need the hammer, and that hammer needs to be applied with conviction. It needs to be applied with some assertiveness. I don't know how you could apply a hammer without a considerable amount of assertiveness. And we need to apply the support that's necessary from an economic point of view to the people that would suffer if that hammer is laid down. If that hammer is laid down, does it mean smashing or not smashing? It seems unclear. You know the old saying, if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything begins to look like a nail? Well, that's the stage of COVID-19 panic that we have reached. Speaking from a Toronto hospital, Shakawi gave the example of Ontario Premier Doug Ford's week of moving the goalposts around. The color-coded zoning system the province has been moved under as an example of the dissonance being shown as of late between politicians and health experts in terms of what measures are needed to respond to a surging second wave of the pandemic. Quote, the principles of containment need to be uniformly applied across Canada. I think the error that we've made is going through this piecemeal approach of wait and see, going through a nuanced dance, if you will, of COVID-19. The dance isn't working anymore. We're breaking each other's legs. We're doing it economically. We're doing it in terms of lives that are lost. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said Friday that Canada has to reverse its accelerating growth trends now, or the federal government and the country could be facing a series of hard choices about where to deploy resources to respond to an overwhelmed healthcare system and hurting an economy. We're seeing a really troubling surge across the country. The fact that Dr. Theresa Tam, who is Canada's chief medical officer, is highlighting that modeling predicts 10,000 cases a day across the country by early December. If we do not bend the curve, what are they still talking about that? Should be a wake-up call for everyone. As has been his position during the peak of the first wave, despite there now being far more new daily cases in Canada, Trudeau remains resistant to invoke what many have seen as the hammer, the Emergencies Act. The federal law would supersede provincial jurisdiction to grant extraordinary powers to Ottawa to enact certain nationwide security measures. I'm looking through this story and continuing to scroll down through this story. Deaths. There's no mention of deaths in this story. And there is no mention of ICU cases and what the ICU capacity is in any province or nationally. Yes, we have a lot more cases, but as we know, and as reflected by the deaths which I just recounted from the province of Alberta, if you are under the age of 70, you have a 99.95% chance of surviving COVID-19. But people are being infected. Now, I would think that the most relevant question would be, how sick are these people getting? And if the vast, vast, vast majority of people are experiencing symptoms similar to that of the flu, then it's not really a crisis, is it? I see Andrew Morris. His Twitter bio describes himself as obsessive, period, compulsive, period, ID physician, basketball coach, lots of XS chromosomes in my life. I have no idea what he means by that. Fitness, no pharma, conflicts. He tweeted, today, along with other colleagues, we're calling on governments to pursue a COVID-0 strategy. There are many ways that this can be pursued, but acceptance of various levels of low cases or rates of transmission have proved to lead to repeated waves and where we are today. Yes, that is how viruses work. He continued, as most of the country enters into various restrictive measures to arrest transmission cycles, now is the time for governments and the public to decide, do we want repeated cycles of various tight restrictions, or do we wish to move to a more normal life? Yeah, more normal life, but aren't we being told that we're not going back to the old normal? Someone called DEFCON 10,000 responded, this is entirely unfeasible. COVID has already shown itself to be a relatively mild illness, as shown by the estimated IFR. When the PCR test is a 50% false positive rate, at least there will never be COVID-0. You should not be advocating policy based on fear. Yes, I would say so, but I am definitely in the minority here. Dr. Bonnie Henry, who is British Columbia's chief medical officer, reminds us to wear a mask. Isn't everyone wearing masks now? It's pouring rain outside, and the few bedraggled people that I see on the street are wearing masks. Oh, Aaron Roderick, and who is he? Oh, he's a voice actor and a Twitch streamer. Okay, an authoritative personality. Dr. Bonnie Henry has been encouraging people to wear masks since March, and so many people in BC ignoring her recommendations or feel they are the exception. We don't need recommendations. Encouragement isn't working, and people aren't listening. Hashtag lock it down. You first, pal. I must have said this 50 times since February. The only way that lockdowns will work to bring about COVID-0 is if people are locked into the residences until they are dead. Because short of that, they're going to get outside and the virus is going to spread. Oh, let's see. Bonnie Henry said today, we need to be thinking along the same vibes, as in April. Vibes, huh? I never understood how important vibes were to epidemiologists. Someone called Memetorialist says, I believe that while there are belligerent COVIDiots out there who will resist if masks are mandated, there are also many who don't wear them because there is no mandate. A mandate will increase the percentage of mask wearing. That's me. Dr. Bonnie Henry, however, digs in. And I suppose that if we made it an offense, as the old joke goes, not to wear green on Thursday, you'd see many, many more people wearing green on Thursday. What is the latest from Britain? Christmas still in peril, as Matt Hancock, the health secretary, warns that it is too early to know if COVID cases will fall enough to lift national lockdown on December the 2nd, but says we should start to see results in the next 7 days. Yes, and if they end the lockdown on December the 2nd and people start going about their life as they had previously, then the number of cases is going to flare up again. COVID-19 is a brain parasite. Oh, and here's a COVID story that has a link, as all things do these days, to Megan Mertz. This is from the Daily Mail. The woman appointed by the World Health Organization to investigate China's response to the coronavirus outbreak is facing calls to resign over her close ties to Beijing. Former New Zealand Prime Minister Helen Clark will co-chair the independent panel for pandemic preparedness and response, which will examine accusations that China failed to alert the world to the looming COVID-19 catastrophe. But human rights groups fear that Ms. Clark's links to China, in particular her friendship with TV anchor James Chow, a friend of the Duchess of Sussex, could seriously undermine the panel's credibility. Chow's role as a World Health Organization ambassador is being probed after he was accused of spouting Beijing propaganda. In a letter to Clark, Hillel Neuer, executive director of human rights group UN Watch, said, we respectfully request that you recuse yourself as co-chair of the WHO inquiry. Your close ties with the Chinese government give rise to the appearance of bias, which under international law are grounds for recusal. Earlier this year, Chow posted a selfie with Clark on Twitter and wished her a happy 70th birthday. Chow, 42, is being investigated by the WHO after presenting a program on state-controlled China Central TV in 2013 that included a confession by Peter Humphrey, a British corporate investigator working in China. Humphrey claims it was obtained under duress. Chow has also defended China's conduct over the pandemic. Chow and the Duchess have been pictured arm in arm at high-profile charity events such as the One Young World Summit in 2016. Megan Mertz has described him as a savvy and charming gent. From Peter Hitchens on Sunday, How extraordinary that Boris Johnson's government, while in serious money trouble, chooses to spend billions on a vaccine against a disease which in many cases has no symptoms at all. Yet this peculiar decision is a mere ripple on the surface of a much deeper problem. Britain in 2020 has many economic difficulties, but good credit. The leaders and investors of the world believe the UK is run by responsible people and will repay its debts. But the Treasury and the Bank of England are creating money out of nothing on a huge scale. It is like the old fairy tale of Rumpelstiltskin, who could spin gold out of straw, but at a terrible price. Put at its simplest, more than 150 billion pounds of Britain's Himalaya-sized national debt has effectively been paid off at no cost, using money created by and passed between the Treasury and the Bank of England. The bonds involved are supposed to be sold to real investors who profit from generous interest payments and then are meant to be bought back from them. But in this case, the government invested in itself, forgave itself the interest, and then paid itself back. I wonder what would happen to any private business which behaved like this. It is clever, but it is playing with fire, and it will come back in many ways to bite us. Major inflation is a possible result. I just mentioned these known facts to let you know how bad things are and how close we are to copying countries such as Argentina, once rich, now poor, which traded for years on their reputations and lived as they had not been used to living long after they could not pay their bills until it went wrong. The new reality, existing jobs vanish, future jobs never alive. Jolly Chancellor Rishi Sunak can postpone employment, but he can't prevent it. Even before Johnson put his thumb back on the national windpipe in his latest shutdown, unemployment, especially among the young, was on the way up, and it now stands at 14.6%. Something about from Peter Hitchens about masks. A serious Danish study on the effectiveness or lack of it of face coverings has still not yet been published. The result is a randomized controlled trial, the gold standard of scientific inquiry in such things. But according to Copenhagen newspaper Berlingske, 3 scientific journals have turned it down. Nobody will say why. I'd only say that in recent months, existing research casting doubt on the usefulness of masks has been increasingly difficult to find on the internet, sometimes actually disappearing from places where it used to be. Let's go to the chat. Trump will not get a second term, says Alex DeLarge. Yes. Oh, look, you can see the microphone. You see the dimensions here have changed because of my new camera. I haven't started fiddling with this yet. I'd like it a little closer, but we'll see what we can do. Alex DeLarge says this isn't going away until widespread inoculation. We've already been told by numerous authorities, including today, that do you think that even with vaccination, even with a vaccine that was 90% effective, that's going to mean the end of masks and social distancing? No. Justin Proto says responsible freedom equals you are a farm animal. Dr. Earl Pipe says Dr. Abdu and Dr. Shaka Khan. Has anyone else noticed that all these public health experts, both in Canada and the United States, that very few of them seem to be, shall we say, of old stock citizens? I'm concerned about this because these people who have now rearranged our lives drastically come from places, often directly from places where there is absolutely no tradition of liberty whatsoever. Ahead McNeck says, if this kind of thing was in any way under our control, why haven't we outlawed cold and flu season yet? That might be coming. Chocokin666, folding a fitted sheet always leads me to thoughts of arson. Okay. I like this from Glib Medley. For a man with a mask, everything looks like an infectious disease. Earl Pipe, why aren't hookup sites like Tinder shut down to stop the spreaders? Well, Dr. Anthony Fauci, he had no problem with Tinder and Grindr. No, not at all. Octopus Knight says it's actually like trying to kill a fly with a sledgehammer, actually even more absurd than that. Thomas Henderson says, didn't Papa Pierre evoke the Emergency Measures of the War Measures Act? Yes, he did in October 1970, after 2 people had been kidnapped in the entire country. Yeah, that's right. It lasted for about 6 months. Habeas corpus was suspended. Hundreds of innocent people spent up to 6 months in prison. And I suppose Pierre Trudeau thought that he had crushed the nationalist movement in Quebec, but his actions led to the inexorable rise of the Parti Québécois. And 5 years after the October crisis in 1970, a Parti Québécois government was elected in Quebec. William Hicks says, seems like this latest wave of infections probably happened, 2 to 4 weeks ago? So the authorities reflexively go to shutdowns because they've been so successful. Contrecoup says, one study found that the risk of mortality for citizens under age 65 of UK and US hotbeds during the peak of the first wave was roughly equivalent to the risk of dying on their daily driving commute. Another lockdown would be absolute madness, but we're not at COVID zero yet, so there has to be another lockdown, and a more severe lockdown. We've got to save Christmas. Thanksgiving wasn't saved, but now we've got to save Christmas, and after Christmas is canceled, and I increasingly believe that it will be, then we need to lock down in order to save New Year's Day, Martin Luther King Day, Valentine's Day. Ooh, Valentine's Day. That sounds like a super spreader event, doesn't it? Octopus Knight says, I hope Biden includes more BIPOC and alphabet people voices on his COVID team. Well, his leading COVID advisor believes that people shouldn't live past the age of 75 because they're useless. Yeah, he's actually said this. Earl Pipe says, any Twitterati clamoring for more authoritative lockdowns should be locked up in a solitary prison cell for the length of this pandemic. Anyone see Elon Musk took 4 tests, 2 positive, 2 negative, says Justin Proto. I did see that. And what, he's being called a Karen now? Yeah, that was trending on Twitter today. Karen Elon, or Elon Karen, something like that. Thomas Henderson, tech companies, Amazon, Walmart, and lending institutions have benefited tremendously from COVID shutdown. Indeed, they have, because we don't need society. Humans are not social creatures. We don't need to be in direct physical contact with other humans. We just need to stare into screens. I realize the irony of what I'm saying, considering what I'm doing. So, Frothing Fanboy says, you can't cancel Christmas. What, are the cops out in full force going to stop every vehicle on the street or highway on Christmas Day or Eve? Well, they have already threatened in Britain the cops to peer through windows, and if they see too many people, they are going to enter the premises and start dispensing swift justice. Okay, let's go to a voice of reason, one of the few here. I'm going to be talking a little more about Boris Johnson and the mess that he has got himself into, cherchez la femme. This is from Toby Young today. The Prime Minister was self-isolating last night after Lee Anderson, a Conservative MP with whom Boris had a 35-minute meeting, tested positive. But why has he got to self-isolate, given that he had COVID-19 less than 6 months ago, and even the British Medical Journal admits that T-cell immunity lasts at least 6 months? The Mail Online has an explanation. It is possible to contract COVID-19 twice with 5 confirmed cases of reinfection reported globally as of last month. 5. That's not even statistical static. Tests have shown that many people who recover from COVID-19 do have antibodies which can produce future immunity, but not enough is known about whether protection is long-term, as the virus has only been known to science for less than a year. Even if a patient is asymptomatic, they may still be able to pass on the virus to the people they're in close contact with. But hang on, Toby Young points out. If having had COVID-19 less than 6 months ago doesn't give you immunity, what hope is there for a vaccine? The BioNTech Pfizer vaccine is already a two-parter. Will we be expected to have a booster every few months as well? As the Mail Online points out, the telephone call from NHS Test and Trace couldn't have come at a worse time for the Prime Minister, who is hoping to relaunch his government this week after the recent upheavals among his staff at number 10. And I will get to, oh yes, this is really quite remarkable. This is the Prime Minister's message to his MPs, which was sent on WhatsApp. Evening, folks. The good news is that NHS Test and Trace continues to improve. The bad news is that I have been pinged. This afternoon, I got an email saying I have been in contact with someone, my honorable friend, the member for Ashfield, who was subsequently tested positive for COVID. And so I must now self-isolate for 14 days, and I will. It doesn't matter that we are all following the guidance and socially distancing. See the Facebook photo. Okay. What Boris Johnson just admitted there is that he has no confidence in the efficacy of masks and social distancing. None. So if the Prime Minister of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, who has already had COVID-19, oh, I met with someone who tested positive, so now I have to lock myself away for 14 days. There's no escape from this, is there? There's never going to be any escape from this. That's the message I take from this latest absurdity. Britain's Labour Party has demanded the government do more to force social media companies to remove dangerous anti-vax content. Yes, and I can't imagine why people would be a little worried about vaccines which were rushed out in record speed. Also, one of them which needs to be stored at minus 70 degrees. Yeah, and I suppose none of those batches will ever go bad. As I said last week, I do not see this Pfizer vaccine working at scale. I simply do not see that happening. But given how much money has been invested, I don't think that anyone is going to tell Pfizer, for instance, well, we have this new vaccine in minus 70. No, too complicated. Toby Young writes, a reader has drawn my attention to an interview Tom Jefferson did with the German newsweekly Der Spiegel in 2009. The subject was swine flu, but his remarks anticipated the current pandemic. Spiegel said, do you consider the swine flu to be particularly worrisome? Jefferson said, it's true that influenza viruses are unpredictable, so it does call for a certain degree of caution. But one of the extraordinary features of this influenza and the whole influenza saga is that there are some people who make predictions year after year, and they get worse and worse. None of them so far have come about, and these people are still making these predictions. For example, what happened with the bird flu, which was supposed to kill us all? Nothing. But that doesn't stop these people from always making their predictions. Sometimes you get the feeling that there is a whole industry almost waiting for a pandemic to occur. Der Spiegel said, who do you mean? The WHO? Jefferson responded, the WHO and public health officials, virologists, and the pharmaceutical companies. They built this machine around an impending pandemic, and there's a lot of money involved and influence and careers and entire institutions, and all it took was one of these influenza viruses to mutate to start the machine grinding. Heroic Metropolitan Police officers put themselves in the line of fire yesterday to break up a baptism. BBC News reported police halted a baptism service after about 30 worshippers gathered in breach of national lockdown restrictions. Reagan King, lead pastor at the Angel Church Islington, defended his decision to hold the service, saying it served the greater good. The pastor agreed to hold a brief, socially distant outdoor gathering in the church courtyard after officers halted the service. 4 officers stood at the entrance, stopping people from entering. Toby Young comments, thank God for the police. While most of us run away from danger, they run towards it. They didn't even know whether the baby was armed. Where would we be without them? I have been making this point since February, maybe January, but it's good to see someone else making it. Lockdown Skeptics has published an original piece by Nick McLeod, a former insurance actuary who sees plenty of parallels between the panicky overreaction to the COVID pandemic back in March and the initial reaction to the AIDS pandemic. AIDS entered the public consciousness in the mid-1980s. At the time, I was working in the USA as an actuary at a large multi-line insurer. To my surprise, I was given the rather broad brush assignment, assess the effect of AIDS on the health insurance industry in North America. I spent the next several months developing mathematical models of the spread of infection and applying them to official health statistics, which were provided under free subscription by the Centers for Disease Control in their weekly surveillance report. And like anyone who has worked with epidemiological models during an emerging infection, I came to understand that early stage projections are not neutral. They have an intrinsic and marked tendency towards exaggeration of whatever threat they're applied to. The reason is that with any new health condition, early infections and deaths naturally occur among the most susceptible parts of the population. With AIDS, there were clearly defined and relatively small groups of people who were at very high risk, and almost all of the early cases were among members of those groups. As the disease spread to the much lower risk parts of the population, overall rates of infection and death fell significantly. When unrepresentative infection and death rates are derived from early data are projected into the far future, their effects are greatly amplified. Just as a rifle fired at a distant target will turn a tiny error in aim into a miss by miles. And once the projected rates have been translated in numbers of deaths for a population of millions, we end up with apocalyptic forecasts that can't help but induce panic. Many scientists spend their career searching for eye-catching results, and it must be extremely difficult to choose to tone down the few that do occur, especially when they apply to a novel and high-profile disease. The temptation to believe that you've discovered a genuinely awful and important truth is a powerful one. The Royal College of Nursing certainly couldn't resist. In 1985, they predicted that 1 million people in Britain would have AIDS within 6 years, but by 1990, the cumulative total was less than 5,000. And again, COVID poses almost no threat to healthy under 70s in Scotland, as is the case, everywhere else in the world. And this is interesting. A Portuguese professor and lockdown skeptic has sent me a long and informative email about a recent ruling by the Portuguese Court of Appeal, which casts doubt on the reliability of the PCR test. It's a great tribute to the integrity of the Portuguese legal system that the court seems to understand in considerable detail the shortcomings of the PCR test as a diagnostic tool, particularly when not used in combination with a clinical diagnosis. I think this is the best news I've had all week. And finally, on this lamentable subject, we'll check in with Alex Berenson. Okay. From 4 hours ago, Vinay Prasad, and he is a assistant professor. Okay. He had tweeted, Washington State governor now requiring kids to wear cloth masks for outdoor sporting events at all times. P.S. This is the weather. Yes, and I imagine the weather is much like it is here. Where the temperature is in the 40s and it is raining. It's miserable. 46 degrees in Seattle and raining, very similar to where I am, just over the border. Recommendations like this lack evidence, lack basic common sense, and create backlash. Berenson comments a true quadrifecta of idiocy. SARS-CoV-2 doesn't spread outside. Kids aren't at risk, and kids who are healthy enough to play team sports truly aren't. Winter weather and physical activity compromise masks immediately, and oh yeah, masks don't work. Okay. And we're going to move on to something a little different here. Donald Trump. And there was a march, the Million MAGA March, on Saturday, which was attacked, or at least the remnants of it were attacked, but by what I was delighted to see, President Trump define as Antifa scum. Oh, and just a survey of the news from Citizen Free Press. 82,000 sexual abuse claims filed against the Boy Scouts. And golly, I remember when they removed the sexual restrictions for Scoutmasters, and it would be outrageous to suggest that this could turn J.G. Ballard. But it did. It did. I wasn't surprised. Oh, as I was saying just a few minutes ago, Fauci declares you will still need to wear masks after vaccine and social distance. And he was telling this to Jake Tapper of CNN. I would recommend to people to not abandon all public health measures just because you've been vaccinated, the 81-year-old immunologist said, because even though for the general population it might be 90 to 95% effective, you don't necessarily know for you how effective it is, which is the same for all vaccines. It's the same for all medical courses of treatment. But never mind that. Let's check in on Donald Trump's Twitter feed. 57 minutes ago, big victory moments ago in the state of Nevada, the all-Democrat county commissioner race on the same ballot as president, just thrown out because of large-scale voter discrepancy. Clark County officials do not have confidence in their own election security. Major impact. The rate of rejected mail-in ballots is 30 times lower in Pennsylvania this year than it was in 2016. This is why they kept our poll watchers and observers out of the sacred vote counting rooms. Oh, and by the way, this claim about election fraud is disputed by the masters of truth at Twitter. Georgia won't let us look at the all-important signature match. Without that, the recount is meaningless. Open up unconstitutional consent decree now. And he addresses this to Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia. Oh, by the way, this claim about election fraud is disputed. European countries are sadly getting clobbered by the China virus. The fake news does not like reporting this. Trump campaign rejects media reports of changed Pennsylvania case. Just more fake news. Harassment and exclusion of our poll watchers is a big part of our case. Unconstitutional. Oh, try watching OANN. Really great. Oh, I like this. From 10 hours ago, I won the election. Official sources called the election differently. No official source has called the election differently because the votes have not been certified. That is an outright lie. Again, you will remember, because I reminded you, that in the weeks up to November the 3rd, we were told elections aren't called on election day. That never happens. Well, it almost always happens. You get a concession on election night or typically on election morning. It takes weeks and maybe longer to count votes, we were told. Nope. The election's been called by the news media. Oh, and one more from Professor Dr. Donald J. Trump. John Bolton was one of the dumbest people in government that I've had the pleasure to work with. A sullen, dull, and quiet guy. He added nothing to national security except, gee, let's go to war. Also illegally released much classified information. A real dope. Oh, so how many people showed up at the Million MAGA March? Well, according to Ashley Parker of the Washington Post, where democracy dies in darkness, the beginning of Trump's presidency echoes the beginning with a lie. On Saturday, White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany tweeted out 2 overhead photos of President Donald Trump supporters who had gathered for a pro-Trump march in Washington, writing, amazing, more than 1 million marchers for President real Donald Trump descend on the swamp in support. McEnany was off by many orders of magnitude. I wonder if Ashley Parker understands what an order of magnitude is many orders of magnitude. The crowd of thousands, was a notable show of force, perhaps, but a far cry from the million marchers. She claimed thousands. Well, I guess that could be anywhere from 2,000 to 9,000. Is she seriously suggesting? She seems to be hinting that there was no more than, say, 9,999 people there, where it's obvious from looking at the pictures and the video, many more. It rather reminds me of one of Armando Iannucci's productions, Time Trumpet, where they have Alistair Campbell, who was the inspiration for Malcolm Tucker, talking about the big protest in London against the invasion of Iraq in 2003. And Alistair Campbell says there were just a few hundred people there shopping. That's pretty much the line that they're taking. It used to be, in the 1960s, say, you'd have these big protests, and the implication was, look at all of these people who've gone onto the street to protest presidential policies, so you must listen to the people. But we saw with the banning of blood sports in Britain, and we saw with, again, the invasion of Iraq, estimated 400 to 600,000 people there, and the attitude of the Blair government was, what are you going to do about it? The attitude of the news media, led by Ashley Parker, there was hardly anybody there. There's a bunch of losers. A bunch of losers. Yeah, well, we shall see about that. Robert Reich, who was Secretary of Labor in Bill Clinton's cabinet, he seems to be on the verge of something which is not good. He tweeted yesterday, if there's a national emergency with more than 1,000 Americans dying each day, and the president who is ignoring it has been voted out of office, and the incoming president will make it his highest priority, shouldn't there be some constitutional way to speed up the change? I responded with what? Tanks? This is what they're taught. This is the position that they have reached. So is Robert Reich going to be there? Is he going to be, I don't know, a captain, say, in the 1st Economists Brigade, wearing his tin hat and clutching his rifle? I doubt it somehow. Jim Kunstler, don't mess with Ms. Powell. That's his column this morning. Despite risk to nation, Trump resists transition and fans conspiracies. President Trump's refusal to concede has entered a more dangerous phase as he withholds intelligence, pandemic information, and government access from his successor. That's a headline from where else? The New York Times, Monday morning edition. The paper no longer prints news stories. It releases DNC talking points, such as this one referring to conspiracy theories, one of their faves. The catch, of course, is when an organization, say the Democratic Party, meddles in election vote tabulation, you have what? A plan acted on by a group to do something unlawful. That would be a conspiracy. They surely had the motive and apparently the means. You can play rhetorical games with the theory part, but then there's the evidence trail and how it comports with reality. The word theory, you see, is not a synonym for a falsehood as they pretend it is. Many theories are proven true. An eerie silence oppressed the election news space much of last week as Trump and his people seemed to lay low, Brer Rabbit style. And a lot of folks wondered what was going on in that their briar patch. Towards the weekend, Rudolph Giuliani methodically described some of the evidence in hand about janky ballot reporting, but that must have been too plodding for the big media gang. Then another Trump lawyer, Sidney Powell, came on Lou Dobbs' Friday evening show, and some people started paying attention to some things she said, like, I'm going to release the Kraken, referring to the largest and most feared sea monster in Old Norse mythology. Ms. Powell, she means business. She went on, quote, we have staggering statistical evidence. We have staggering personal testimony. We're beginning to collect evidence on the financial interest of the governors and secretaries of state who bought into the Dominion vote tabulation systems. President Trump won this election in a landslide. It is irrefutable. We are going to go after it, and I'm going to expose every one of them, unquote. Well, that might have put the fear of God in some people. In case anyone in the back of the class wasn't paying attention, Ms. Powell went back on the air Sunday morning with Maria Bartiromo and said, "We're fixing to overturn the results of this election in multiple states. President Trump won not by hundreds of thousands of votes, but by millions of votes that were shifted by this software that was designed expressly for that purpose. We have so much evidence, I feel like it's coming in like a fire hose," unquote. Is she bluffing? Why would she try, since the time left in this game is short and her only play is to show her cards? "I never say anything I can't prove," she declared. Combine the software with crooked poll workers and a pattern emerges. Votes added and subtracted in a behind-the-scenes drag-and-drop operation with bundles of paper write-in ballots trucked in desperately to support the fraud during the hours-long blackout periods late on election night when it became obvious that the Trump vote was more overwhelming than anticipated. The Dominion voting system appears to have been connected to the internet, despite election rules that it was not allowed to be. Affidavits indicate that USB ports on the machine, supposedly only for diagnostic purposes, were repeatedly fed thumb drives during the blackout hours. The shady Dominion voting system company has U.S. headquarters in Denver, but it is based in Canada. Its voting systems are used in 30 U.S. states, including all the swing states. Dominion machines and software are implicated in the manipulation of elections in Venezuela and the Philippines. In 2009, Dominion entered into a partnering agreement with Smartmatic, a vote tabulation software add-on whose chairman, Lord Mark Malloch Brown, is former vice chairman of George Soros's investment funds. Dominion. Oh, and the New York Times, they have refuted any links between George Soros and possible election fraud. They've refuted it. Oh, and then they admit in the story that, Mark Malloch Brown, former vice chairman of George Soros's investment funds, is the chairman. Yeah, there's nothing to see here. Dominion formed a development partnership with the Canada-based Delian system in 2014 with financial support from the Clinton Foundation. Both Dominion and Smartmatic have swapped ownership of Sequoia Voting Systems, the company implicated in Venezuelan ballot fraud. I'll just interrupt to say this is a money-making business here. Vote counting machines. Why would a for-profit company need financial support from the Clinton Foundation, which is allegedly a charity? Sidney Powell stated that these international relationships point to possible foreign interference in U.S. elections, the very charge that the Democratic Party flogged into the 3-year-long Russiagate affair. At least it raises the issue, why are U.S. elections using voting machines and software affiliated with foreign countries? In her weekend statements, Powell did not refer to the two CIA or DIA election manipulation programs, Hammer, there's that word again, and Scorecard, though she called explicitly for the firing of CIA Chief Gina Haspel. Haspel, remember, was head of the CIA's London desk when the U.S. intel community was busy cooking up the Hillary Clinton-sponsored Steele dossier assembled by former British MI6 agent Christopher Steele. She also assisted in arrangements to entrap General Michael Flynn at a conference run by Intel asset Stephen Halper at Magdalen College at the University of Cambridge. It's a pretty rich game board out there, and the clock is ticking. The possible outcomes are several. The state legislatures in disputed states could choose their own elector slates. In short order, the president's lawyers will take their case to the U.S. Supreme Court, which might invalidate the disputed states' elections and send the contest into the House of Representatives, a la the 1876 Hayes-Tilden election. The Department of Justice could level felony charges before December 8th at a long list of companies and persons involved in demonstrable ballot fraud. This could amount to decapitation of the deep state. Would Mr. Barr dare? A lot of people doubt it. I'm sure readers can conjure up other possibilities. In any case, a final victory for Joe Biden would hopelessly taint any administration he leads and would lead to much harsher resistance coming from the other side this time, while he's trying to govern during an economic calamity worse than the Great Depression of the 1930s. Maybe ex-CIA Chief John Brennan should never have messed with General Mike Flynn. Just saying. And I am going to check and see what the picture looks like here. I think we need a little more light. Just give me a second here. As I say, I've got this lighting rig, which should be up, I think, by the end of the week. Okay, there we go. A little more light. Okay. Let's have a look at the chat. David Havel says, no one says release the Kraken. Is it Kraken or Kraken? Better than Laurence Olivier. Yo Mama says Reich's feet don't touch the ground when he eats breakfast. 4'11". Yes, that is no. It's not just voting machines. There are software systems, telephonic systems, routing systems, for voice and data in the United States, which are based in foreign countries. And how is that allowed? How is that allowed? Chocokin 666, Philly mob boss wants immunity to spill the beans on vote fraud. I saw that story. It's from the Buffalo Chronicle, which is a newspaper. I'm not going to say it's illegitimate. I'm just going to say that it is, well, I'll leave it at that. Half Galician says Powell talks a big game. So far has delivered nothing. Alex Delarge, Reich is a member of the Lollipop Guild. Dow closing on record. Trump tweeting about stock market again. Economic calamity, says Half Galician. Again, I suppose this is the world that Trump came to fruition in, that the stock market is everything, that is the most reliable indicator of the economic health of the United States. And of course it isn't. But everyone else seems to do it as well. YT says, how many more would show up if not for censorship of Stop the Steal event pages and threat of violence? Okay. My first comment earlier was filtered by YT, so my second comment made no sense. Okay. The Eagle Scouts will never forget. Yeah, we'll never forget when they let those people in. Trump couldn't be bothered to speak at his own march. LMAO. Well, no, I think this was a deliberate decision that it wasn't his rally. It was a rally for the people. And they did it all themselves, which I think is impressive. Because you had a very large number of people, and they were controlled, they were peaceful, they were later attacked by Antifa scum. But yeah, Thomas Henderson says, will the politicians and billionaire class lead the way and show how safe the vaccine is by taking it first? No, I don't think so. Oh, I like this from Halper. Here comes your 19th COVID breakdown. One of my favorite Rolling Stones songs. Frothing Fanboy says, Steve Saylor at UNS is anxiously looking forward to all and any vaccines. He is the biggest fraidy cat on the planet. Yeah, I've been reading him about this. We'll see if it works. We'll see if it works. As I say, I'm not very sure about this again because of the rush. Because of the tremendous rush and the obvious abandonment of clinical standards. Also, placebo? Yeah, not exactly a placebo that was used. Joe Biden, as we know, is a man of the utmost probity. I did not know until a couple of days ago that there is a Joe Biden Foundation. Why do all of these people have to have their own foundations? I mean, to show that they care about something? There are many, presumably good foundations out there. Why not just give money to them? This is from the Mail. Joe Biden's cancer charity spent more than $3.7 million on staff salaries, but distributed zero towards research grants over 2 years. Tax filings reveal. First reported by the New York Post, the Biden Cancer Initiative amassed $4.8 million in contributions, but spent $3.1 million on salaries. Joe and Jill Biden founded the Biden Cancer Initiative in 2017 to help find a cure and solutions to accelerate progress in cancer prevention. And I'm looking at a picture of Joe Biden here, and he's standing at a lectern which reads Office of the President-elect. There's a large banner behind him that says Office of the President-elect. Of course, there is no Office of the President-elect. Has that Dale fellow, Daniel Dale at CNN, I mean, he just must be frothing with outrage. Isn't he screaming, fact check, fact check? There's no such thing as the Office of the President-elect? I mean, I would think that it's pretty impressive, don't you think? He has invented an office that says President-elect. That is to say, oh, he's certified as the president, upcoming president. Of course, there's no such office, and he has not been certified. But no, of course, no one's making a fuss about that. Again from the Mail, Joe Biden says Donald Trump's embarrassing refusal to coordinate on virus response and start transition means more people may die, as he warns of a very dark winter before COVID vaccine arrives. What about his prediction? His prediction that there was going to be 400,000 deaths by the end of the year. More people may die if we don't coordinate. No, sorry. He doesn't get to be president, if he ever does become president, until January the 20th. And there is a regime in place. He called on the Trump administration to give his transition team access to their plan to distribute a COVID vaccine. Well, I'm sure they will get the plan eventually, if that becomes necessary. He and Kamala Harris met with business and union leaders Monday afternoon. Biden warned unions would have increased power in his administration. White-collar unions, certainly. Blue-collar unions, not a chance. Yes, and here's the aforesaid story from the Buffalo Chronicle. The innermost circles of the American mafia, or abuzz, the boss of the Philly mob, Skinny Joey Merlino, is taking a victory strut, hobnobbing around the highest echelons of old-time mafia folk, mostly in Florida, describing what may have been the heist of the century, the 2020 presidential election. The feat is drawing praise from far-flung corners of the Italian-American business community, which sees the thanks of a grateful administration as key to the revival of the community's political influence. But an associate says that Merlino might just be willing to flip on Joe Biden and the Pennsylvania political operatives who ordered up some 300,000 election ballots marked for Biden. The source alleges that Merlino and a lean team of associates manufactured those ballots at a rate of $10 per, a whopping $3 million for 3 days of work. They were then packaged into nondescript cardboard boxes and dropped off outside the Philadelphia Convention Center. Oh, and a woman that the media is telling us that we're going to be hearing an awfully lot about, the new first daughter, Ashley Biden, has a troubled and racy past, but now settled with her plastic surgeon husband. She's set to take Washington by storm. Her full name is, and I'm not making this up, Ashley Blazer, B-L-A-Z-E-R, Ashley Blazer Biden. I think we got a pretty good idea who chose that name, why that would be Jill. Sorry, Dr. Jill. Ashley Blazer Biden. Yes, I just imagine that you walk into Nordstrom and the saleswoman says, could I show you something from the Ashley Blazer collection? It's just these silly, silly women who pick these non-standard names in the belief that this somehow conveys class and sophistication. No, it does the exact opposite. This is not related not directly to the fight for the presidency, but you may have heard that Rick Moranis, the actor and one of my favorite people due to the years he spent on writing and acting on SCTV, he was attacked by a stranger on the streets of New York City. So a fellow called Marquis Ventura, 35, is accused of sucker punching Moranis. Ventura is also said to have pulled a knife on Ashley Davis, 34, and her husband Glenn Smith, 34, before beating them both on the subway on April the 13th. He was arrested on Saturday night in New York City for the assault on Moranis. It has now emerged that he was also charged after the couple were attacked. I thought my husband was dying. I could see he was crazy, Ashley said. So, why am I interested in this story? Okay, so this fellow pulls out a knife and severely beats a husband and wife. Ventura was arrested Saturday night at 96th and Broadway subway station. The Manhattan resident has a history of 13 arrests, including 5 for felonies, according to the Post. Now it has emerged that he was charged with misdemeanor assault after Davis and Smith were attacked. Misdemeanor assault, causing serious injuries to 2 strangers and pulling a knife on them. Misdemeanor assault. Restaurant manager Ashley says her attacker, later identified as Ventura, randomly started beating her and her husband. After pulling a knife, Ashley says he punched her in the face before kicking and hitting her spouse. Here's the good part. Smith was also charged with misdemeanor menacing with a weapon, court records show, after Davis said her husband picked up a knife Ventura dropped. Prosecutors had offered to drop both charges, but Smith says they are pursuing the case. What exactly do you have to do in New York City now? Like to be arrested and stay arrested, to do prison time now? Because, you know, if it's murder, then I guess this is a charter for all criminals to beat people or stab people or shoot people right up to the point of murder. Is this deliberate? Is this an attempt to scare people, to chase out white people from New York City? Because they left in large numbers in the 1970s and 1980s. And then they came back. They were enticed to come back. But are they just, is white supremacy now so noxious that they must be forced out again? This is a story, again, from the Daily Mail. Cops say mutilation to face of Louisiana teen Kwawan Charles was caused by aquatic animals after he drowned, despite family claiming he was murdered, in case that has sparked national protests. Kwawan Bobby Charles vanished from his family's home on October 30th. On November 3rd, his mutilated body was found in a sugarcane field. The teen's death and disappearance has sparked speculation about racial crime. Sheriff Tommy Romero called it an active, ongoing homicide investigation. He said footage shows Charles, who was black, alone near where he was found. The teen had been picked up by Janet and Gavin Irwin, a white mother and son. Gavin claims Kwawan came to their trailer but then left on his own. October 30th, the coroner said Friday drowning appears to be the most likely cause of death. Well, this is a sad story, no question, but money. Looks like there's money involved here. Demonstrators and the state NAACP president have called for justice for Charles. Now, I don't know how they could possibly do that, given that it is not yet been determined how he died, or if anyone is responsible. A fundraising page is set up to raise $15,000 for an independent autopsy and other expenses, shows a photo of his face next to one of 14-year-old Emmett Till, who was lynched in 1955. It had brought in more than $244,000 from 12,800 donors as of Saturday. This is absolutely sickening. That, oh yes, my child is dead. I am so grief-stricken. What are we looking at here? Are we looking at maybe $1 million, $2 million, $2.5 million in the settlement? Yeah, I'm really anxious. Get back to me on that, okay? This is from the New York Post by Aaron Feiss. Portland politician who called 9/11 over lift spat blames white supremacists. And there's a picture of Joanne Hardesty, and I thought Lori Lightfoot was terrifying enough that we're into Gorgon territory here. I joked on Twitter earlier, have deep fakes gone too far? A Portland, Oregon politician who called the cops over an argument with her Lyft driver despite her support for the defund the police movement now says she acted out of a fear of white supremacists, because we know that Portland is crawling with white supremacists. White supremacists own Portland. It's their city. City Commissioner Joanne Hardesty. So Joanne Hardesty, tremendous commitment to the city of Portland. Born in 1957, raised in Baltimore, Maryland, and was elected to the Oregon House in 1994. Okay. So she was 37 years old when she came to Oregon. And of course, Baltimore is a hellhole, but what Portland needed, obviously, was some Baltimore ideas, some Baltimore attitudes. Portland is a very sort of boring white bread place, and it just needs some edge. Baltimore edge. In 2020, Hardesty voted to cut $18 million in funding from the Portland Police Bureau budget. However, the vote failed 3-2. These actions drew harsh criticism when Hardesty called 911 after not wanting to leave a Lyft driver's vehicle when he left the windows cracked during the COVID-19 pandemic, citing Lyft's suggestion to maintain air circulation. Hardesty was picked up from a casino and was dropped off at a filling station along Interstate 5 when she called 911 to report an emergency. Isn't that the sort of thing that Karens are said to do? She has a dispute with a Lyft driver and she calls 911, but she has an explanation. This is another example of being Black in America and being put in a position where I have to be the one to look out for my personal safety. Yeah, that's how it works for everybody. Unless you're rich enough to hire bodyguards, you have to be the one to look out for your personal safety. I didn't expect the Lyft driver to do it, certainly didn't expect the police to do it. It was my responsibility to make sure I got home safe. But you called the police. When you're living in a city where white supremacists are proudly riding around in their big trucks with their flags, and you're a Black person and somebody wants to put you on the side of the road at night, not gonna happen, she said. Oh, that reminds me, I came across an extraordinary video, and it is from The Cut. And I'm sure I've heard of The Cut, but just let me confirm what The Cut is. Oh, okay. It's a site for women who want to view the latest fashion trends, read provocative takes on issues that matter, from politics to relationships, follow celebrity style icons, and preview new products. It is got everything. So they put out a video, which is 5 minutes long, yesterday. So what exactly are white people superior at? Oh, this sounds kind of dangerous, doesn't it? Let's see. This video has 156,187 views, 5,000 likes, and 24,000 dislikes. And it just say, incredibly, it's a list of Black people, one after the other, just saying how horrible Black people are and how stupid they are. We asked 100 Black folks, F-O-L-X. Yeah, really. Yeah, and it's like white people superiors, and they're all making faces, and yeah, it's just white people. Don't you just hate them? Yeah. Do they want a civil war? Is that what they want? because it is a truism, and it's true in the United States as well as it is anywhere else on earth, that the welfare of the minority or minorities depends on the goodwill of the majority. And the very life of Black people in the United States depends on largesse from American taxpayers. Oh, apparently white people like to use a lot of mayonnaise in their recipes. Oh, bland food, unseasoned chicken, spice. Yeah, because white people don't care about food. They never cared about food. Apparently, there's no traditions of cooking, no culinary traditions associated with white people. Oh, here's one of my favorites. Okay, we've got this fellow. He's wearing two masks. He's wearing two masks. Okay, so white people, he says, they have more fun than Black people. That's unusual because typically what we hear is that white people are incapable of having any fun. They're just too uptight. But then he explains that's a function of white supremacy because they just don't have as many stresses as we do. Oh, and white people are good at maintaining their privilege. Some guy wearing an Angela Davis t-shirt. Yeah, it's just... Maybe this is what white ladies who are interested in fashion, they want to have a bunch of Black people come on and tell them how worthless they are. I wonder how long that situation is going to obtain. I really wonder about that. Let's see. This is from the Gateway Pundit. We caught them. We were able to replicate the same impossible ballot ratio found in Michigan's Kent County, as reported by Dr. Shiva. 20,000 votes switched from Trump to Biden. Gateway Pundit asked the Department of Justice to investigate Michigan Attorney General's suppression of voter fraud. News. Breaking: Project Veritas. Georgia recount auditors call multiple ballots for Joe Biden that were actually marked for President Trump. With a video, Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger wants elections director to step down after Floyd County finds 2,600 uncounted ballots. Okay. Let's go back to the chat. Brandon Smith says, if only people organized horizontally and attacked vertically rather than the other way round. Brandon Smith, neighbors having a small Christmas get-together, phone our hotline. Yes, someone cast aspersion on the look of Dr. Teresa Tam, and I can't say I disagree. Well, okay, I'm not going to repeat what Chogokin 666 says. Octopus Knight says, spice is often used to cover the smell and taste of rotten food. Yes, I'm sure that's true. I would think much more in the past than today. A narco-tyranny in New York, says Professor Jonathan Paul. Hello, Professor. She's a dazzling blazer, says Patrick Chapman. Was Jill a Mormon, says you, Mama? Not to my knowledge. 2000 is the year of the LARP, says Yo Mama. Half Galician says, Obama did the office of the president-elect 12 years ago. I'm going to have to look into that. And this person also says a foundation is a way to hire friends, family at mega salaries and avoid payroll taxes. Patrick Chapman says foundations are the route to troughing by the political class. People have no sense of shame, embarrassment anymore. So what are you up to these days, Bill? Charity work. Oh, charity work. How noble of you. Yeah, it's noble, but it also pays well. What do you mean? How much are you earning? I don't know. Ballpark. I haven't added up all the perks, but $450K? Yeah. They call it doing well. Well, doing good. It's embarrassing. I mean, there's lots of people who are, retired, from business. Many people retire early these days. They get enough money, they're burned out, whatever. Why not tap these people to run these foundations? I'm sure many of them are looking to give back, as they say. William Briggs, statistician to the stars, has a piece called Effeminacy, COVID, and the Great Reset, to show how much we hunger to give obedience to true authority and how weak we become when we surrender to fear. I give you Justin Trudeau, perhaps the most effeminate of all modern day leaders. And he's talking about the reset. He was speaking yesterday, reaching the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. 2030 agenda, didn't that used to be called Agenda 21? This pandemic has provided an opportunity for he just said reset. This is our chance to accelerate our pre-pandemic efforts to reimagine economic systems that actually address global challenges like extreme poverty, inequality, and global warming. Trudeau, who excels at playing dress-up at parades where men discuss pride at having discovered new ways to, I'm not going to repeat that, only got the job because his father was what many considered a leader. We all want to follow strong, noble leaders who guide us toward reality. We want this natural state so badly, we're willing to put up figments of shadows of reasonable impressions of good leaders. There is no other reason Trudeau, or over the border, Andrew Cuomo, would have their jobs were it not for our perception their fathers were strong or strong-ish, and we believed in the power of blood to convey greatness. This made sense with kings who would claim divine authority. That reasoning fails utterly for these two and for many more examples. Trudeau is not unpopular, though, not with the majority, same with Cuomo. This is because both men learned, or more likely they're being coached by their betters, how to sell fear to an increasingly effeminate populace. Rather, both are selling the solution to the fear they helped cause. They tried pushing fear of global warming. That didn't work because people could look out their windows and see what was happening. The threats of weather doom made by government and the media were always distant and far into the future. Some panicked, it's true, but not enough. It was much easier with the corona doom. Night after night came images of doctors and nurses, we suppose, in suits that could survive nuclear blasts, showing patients of what kind, who knows, hooked up to plumbing systems more complicated than those that run through aircraft carriers. This will be you soon unless you follow orders. Death, death, death. And after deaths decreased and the numbers lost their power to terrorize, they switched to cases, cases, cases. Only a rare few paused to consider the risk. According to the CDC, the population fatality rates for various age groups dying from COVID or something else. The risk is no higher than 0.0001 for those 34 and under. There is 10 times the risk of dying from other causes, mostly accidents, suicide, and cancer. This 10 times figure or more applies to every age bracket. The risk of COVID death only increases into a real concern once you pass 85, maybe 75. There was and is no reason for people to panic or to fear, especially if they're otherwise healthy. The numbers go down for the healthy and up for the ill, those who already have other sicknesses. When was the last time Trudeau or Cuomo or anybody in the corporate media or government told you these statistics? Oh, and then he mentions the United States bishops, which I will get to. Tell this to the next panicked person you meet. It was your fear, your willingness to be scared, your screaming, save me, your gullibility in believing every new horror story, your simplicity in allowing the fraud Fauci to prosper, your effeminate panic that allowed the wholesale grab in power currently underway. Again, lockdowns failed the first time, they caused death and misery. Now with the false headlines of increases in cases, they're doing them again. Only now they're calling them freezes, old wine in old skins. The Oregon ruler is threatening to jail those violating our harmful orders. How is it the only solution offered by our rulers has been to throw people out of work, thereby transferring more wealth to the oligarchs? The great transfer of wealth from you to them is what the Great Reset is. It's underway now, being driven by our fear. Oh, and what Mickey Kaus was saying, that he thought that there would be the censorship move to silence everyone who disagrees. We'd get a little less of it now that, he thinks that Biden's been elected. No, and I predicted the opposite of Kaus. Shoot the wounded. That is their MO now. Most conservative Treehouse readers are likely aware of the term deplatforming. Unfortunately, the big tech control mechanism to shut down speech and assembly has now arrived on our doorstep. 1 week after the 2020 presidential election, the conservative Treehouse received the following notification. Given the incompatibility between your site's content and our terms, you need to find a new hosting provider and must migrate the site by Wednesday, December the 2nd. This is, what does this mean? It means that CTH is being kicked off the WordPress website hosting platform because the content of our research and discussion does not align with the ideology of those who define what is acceptable speech and what is not. What was our violation? After 10 years of brutally honest discussion, opinion, deep research, and crowdsourcing work, with undeniable citations on the events we outlined, there is no cited violation of any term of service because CTH has never violated one. The WordPress company is not explaining the reason for deplatforming because there is no justifiable reason for it. At the same time, they're bold in their position. Perhaps this is the most alarming part, and everyone should pay attention. They don't care. Well, I sense a little naivete there. This is from Sundance. You violated their terms and conditions because they said so. That's it. Again, you violated their terms and conditions because they said so. The fact that they say so is proof of the allegation. This is how the tech companies work now. From the Mail, Jenny Stanton, prominent conservative donor Rebecca Mercer is bankrolling Parler, the rapidly growing right-wing Twitter-like app to overcome the tyranny and hubris of tech overlords. Those who have joined include commentator Candace Owens, President Donald Trump's lawyer Rudy Giuliani, and right-wing activist Laura Loomer. Also, Maria Bartiromo has moved from Twitter. And Rebecca Mercer is a big deal in right-wing money circles. Oh, let's see. Some snark from Newsweek. John Tesh jumps on Parler bandwagon by declaring he's leaving Twitter. Users wonder who he is. A musician, radio host, and presenter, yes, that's who John Tesh is, became a trending topic on Twitter today after he announced his departure from the platform in favor of Parler, a social network favored by conservatives and right-wing personalities. He urged his followers to say goodbye to viciousness and censorship, although he did not provide examples of what he was referring to. And what could he be speaking of? Tesh had tweeted a link to Parler on Saturday, describing it as a much nicer place. Before its deletion, Tesh had 136,573 Twitter followers. Yeah. I've never heard of someone, so that means he doesn't exist. This is this kind of default, really, amongst, how would I put it, millennials and Generation Zero, or whatever they're calling them, that if I've never heard of you, you're not important. Now, of course, we have this thing, we have Google and other search engines. We also have Wikipedia. I think Wikipedia is, for all its bias, it's a pretty good test. If you don't have a Wikipedia entry, then, you're not an important person. You're not a prominent person. This is from RT. Sharing political opinions now irresponsible. Woke mob demands Disney sack Gina Carano after Mandalorian star mocks Democrats. She caused a full-blown Twitter meltdown after sharing a meme claiming that the Democratic Party is trying to swindle Americans, causing Fire Gina Carano to trend on the platform. The image, which shows two men placing face masks over their eyes, reads, Democratic government leaders now recommend we all wear blindfolds along with masks so we can't see what's really going on. Someone wearing a mask tweeted, Disney fired James Gunn because of bad jokes on Twitter dug up by a rapist. What? But Gina Carano was regularly tweeting out transphobic hate. Disney, fire Gina Carano. Gina Carano actively promotes hateful, bigoted views, has tweeted misinformation and conspiracies about the American election, doesn't support wearing masks, treats COVID like a hoax, liked tweets about shooting protesters. This woman is not part of the rebellion. Oh, you mean like in Star Wars? Oh, okay. It's not real. It's not real, you morons. I wanted to talk a little bit more about, before we get to a little bit more about the Great Reset, I'm going to check in on some Twitter feeds. And I guess then we're going to talk about woke women being angry. 2020 is the year of what? Thirsty women, but it's also the year of woke, angry women flexing their muscles. Scott Adams says, most of the people in this country who understand the power of reciprocity are doing fine in life. The rest are fairly sure something unfair happened to them. Until this week, I did not realize there were so many ways to allegedly rig an election. I feel like I got a prison education just reading tweets. Joe Biden turned into that guy in the meeting who always complains about management not having a plan. Yeah, that's quite a good one. Where's your plan? Where's your plan, Trump? Where's your COVID plan? Okay, what's your COVID plan, Joe Biden? Lockdown. No, you've done that. No. I'm not going to lock down the country. I'm going to lock down the virus. Did you just say that, Joe Biden? Did you just seriously say that you weren't going to lock down America? You were going to lock down the virus? How is this guy not laughed off every stage? Oh yeah, because the fix was in. Yeah, okay. That's why he's not laughed off the stage. Let's see what President-elect KG says. The Hill, President-elect Joe Biden, we're going into a very dark winter. Anguished face. Why does he keep saying that? I guess he keeps saying that because, well, all right. He is using COVID. He is hyping up COVID in order to justify his stealing of the election. That's why he is doing it. No question about it. And let's go to J5 Killer. If the situation was hopeless, Real Hursty had tweeted, their propaganda and censorship wouldn't be necessary. They are afraid. And we are winning, says J5 Killer. You know, I've often thought this about global warming. Okay. So you have a revolutionary paradigm, which supposedly requires revolutionary policies. Well, there's some people who are going to disagree with the diagnosis, and there's some people who are going to disagree with the policy suggestions. These people need to be silenced. They're climate deniers. What you're suggesting they're like Holocaust deniers? Are you really doing that? Why is it so necessary to silence these people? If the science is overwhelmingly on your side, and you can produce, 37 million experts who say that climate extinction is at hand, if you have a few dissenters carping there on the sidelines, why are they a problem? What would you be worried about? Well, I'll tell you what they're worried about, because it's all made up. J5 Killer predicts if Georgia flips back to Trump, say tomorrow, it'll all be over by Biden by the end of the week. If you could harness all the tears that will be shed, you could power all the Xmas lights in America through the holidays. Well, that's good news. Lawyers from big law firm Kirkland Ellis are harassing Trump's lawyers by leaving obscene messages on their voicemail. Very classy. Andy No tweeted, breaking, the wanted suspect seen assaulting people after Saturday's pro-Trump rally in D.C. is Brittany S. McAllister, a journalism student and BLM activist. J. Pye Filler comments, we need to shut down journalism until we can figure out what is going on. And yeah, I want to talk more about the Great Reset. The Great Reset is, again, it is a Schrodinger's cat situation, rather like the Great Replacement. Here's how it works. That if you agree with the Great Reset, just as if you agree with the Great Replacement, then it's a good thing. If you disagree with the Great Reset, if you disagree with the Great Replacement and you want to stop it, you are a bad person. You are an evil person. You are a conspiracy theorist dealing in misinformation. I talked briefly about the Great Reset, and there's a video, an interview that Paul Joseph Watson did 2 days ago with James Delingpole, which you can find at Summit News. But Delingpole wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago that had some links in it that I want to refer to one of them, because it's the sort of thing that you come across this and you think, this would be a difficult thing to talk to normies about, because it seems insane, all right? And the response would be, no, that's not happening. You're making this up, and I can't take you seriously any longer, because this is just too monstrous. What you're suggesting, it's too stupid, actually. Build Back Better. This is Joe Biden's incomprehensible slogan, which he rolled out, about 3 or 4 months ago. What does that mean? Build back. It's internally inconsistent, because there's no going back to the normal, the old normal. Build back better. I understand the alliteration, but sometimes alliteration isn't enough. Who's used it? Boris Johnson uses it. Prince Charles uses it. Justin Trudeau uses it. Justin Trudeau uses it a lot. So you've heard me complain about the loss of physical media, how I simply don't trust streaming for all sorts of reasons. It's degraded, and it can be taken away from us at any time, at absolutely any time. And I like to own things because I have control over them. DVDs, Blu-rays. Well, if I had control of them now and they weren't in storage, they'd be, sitting on shelves. And anytime that I wanted to watch something, I could just pull it down, put it in the machine, and I don't have to pay Netflix or Amazon or Disney Plus or any of these people, because I already own it, and I own it in perpetuity. And I don't have to worry that they're going to decide that it's racist or sexist or transphobic or whatever, so you can't watch it anymore. Perhaps you can watch it with the appropriate excisions. This is from the World Economic Forum, and it was published November the 11th, 2016, and it is by Ida Auken, who is described as a member of Parliament of Denmark. Welcome to the year 2030. Welcome to my city, or should I say our city. I don't own anything. I don't own a car. I don't own a house. I don't own any appliances or any clothes. It might seem odd to you, but it makes perfect sense for us in this city. Everything that you considered a product has now become a service. We have access to transportation, accommodation, food, and all the things we need in our daily lives. One by one, all these things became free. So it ended up not making sense for us to own much. First, communication became digitized and free to everyone. Then, when clean energy became free, things started to move quickly. Transportation dropped drastically in price. It made no sense for us to own cars anymore because we could call a driverless vehicle or a flying car for longer journeys within miles. We started transporting ourselves in a much more organized and coordinated way when public transport became easier, quicker, and more convenient than the car. Now, I can hardly believe that we accepted congestion and traffic jams, not to mention the air pollution from combustion engines. What were we thinking? Sometimes I use my bike when I go to see some of my friends. I enjoy the exercise and the ride. It kind of gets the soul to come along in the journey. Funny how some things never seem to lose their excitement. Walking, biking, cooking, drawing, and growing plants. Growing plants, very, very exciting, particularly indoors. It makes perfect sense and reminds us of how our culture emerged out of a close relationship with nature. Did it now? In our city, we don't pay any rent because someone else is using our free space whenever we don't need it. My living room is used for business meetings when I'm not there. You can see where this is going, right? You don't owe anything. As Obermann said, people without possessions are scarcely to be distinguished from animals. Oh, we're just going to swap out your apartment. Yeah, I'm back. Oh, your meeting is going over. So what am I supposed to do? I mean, you could imagine how this is going to work. Yeah, you know what? I get free food. Oh, what? Ramen noodles? Can I get some of that tiramisu? I hear people like to eat that. Sounds delicious. Oh, not available, but I can have more ramen noodles. This is absolutely monstrous. Who is in charge of all this? Oh, we are in charge. Oh, really? When has that ever worked that we are in charge? When products are turned into services, no one has an interest in things with a short lifespan. Everything is designed for durability, repairability, and recyclability. Did they shoot this woman up? I'm assuming it's a woman. Did they shoot her up with drugs in order to come up with this monstrous vision of the future? I mean, you see this no, this is a very cheap pen, but maybe if it wasn't such a cheap pen, maybe it was like a $10 pen or a $15 pen, or maybe a $25 pen, say. And maybe someone had given it to me as a gift, right? Maybe it has sentimental attachment. But no, but you don't own anything anymore because there's no sentimental attachments. And yeah, that stuff you wanted to watch, you're not showing it anymore. Why? Well, because we've passed some new rules that 50% of all of the actors appearing must be non-white. CBS has already done for this for its reality shows in the year 2020. You don't need to watch all that old bigoted stuff anyway, and all of these presentations with their old-fashioned and frankly heteronormative sexual roles. So yeah, there's a little bit of an introduction into the Great Reset. It is an absolute nightmare. Okay, so yes, let's talk about Boris Johnson. Let's have some fun in the closing segment of the show. I don't like Boris Johnson. I've never liked Boris Johnson. I suppose he's amusing in his own way. He was amusing when he was editor of The Spectator, particularly since he didn't edit The Spectator. He was clever enough to get a better journalist than him to edit The Spectator. So The Spectator was good when he was the editor. But Boris Johnson has yearned for decades to be prime minister. And it finally happened. And it is all coming to pieces. And why? Because of Cherchez la Femme. This is from Simon Walters at the Daily Mail. Inside the crazy court of Queen Carrie, Boris's fiance tried to stop COVID meeting so he would battle fake story about her dog. Then he broke rules to appoint new PR Allegra in case lover went effing crackers. Claims say Boris Johnson appointed Allegra Stratton to appease Carrie Simons. This comes after Dominic Cummings and communications chief Lee Kane left Number 10. Aides left after seemingly having lost a power struggle with Ms. Simons and allies. Yes. Now, you could say this story is made up, blown out of proportion. Well, it was reported a week ago that there seemed to be a power struggle going on between Carrie Simons and her, the Future is Female camp, and let's say the professionals, the hard men at Number 10 Downing Street, and they're gone. So it appears that the story is true. The war of words played out in claim and counterclaim has cast a shadow over Johnson's leadership at a time when the country should be focused on fighting the coronavirus pandemic. Downing Street has been braced for a series of revenge stories since Cummings and Kane left, given their inside knowledge of the corridors of power. Friends of Miss Simons hailed her for ending the macho culture within Number 10, denied claims that Johnson was running a government by girlfriend, and accused detractors of rank misogyny. But wait a minute. Women are just as strong, just as tough, more strong and more tough than men. So why is there always this leap to misogyny? And this story gets even more hilarious shortly. Kerry has been dragged into infighting as part of a smear campaign, angry allies said. Oh, so Carrie Simons is just learning now that politics is a rough business. And apparently Allegra Stratton is just learning now that politics is a rough business. Oh, they were briefing against me. Everyone in politics is always briefing against someone. We're supposed to believe that they don't know this? Let's see. Most extraordinary of all was the allegation that as mistrust circled among those closest to the PM, discussions were even held in which one official suggested that top secret information should be kept from Mr. Johnson's red box, the government briefcases used by all ministers. The notion was reportedly floated in response to concern that some non-sensitive issues in his red box had been mysteriously leaked. There is no suggestion that Miss Simons was involved. You see how that was phrased? That's how you do it. That's how you do it to avoid a defamation suit. Insiders said the acrimony between Simons and Cummings and Kane was as obvious as far back as March. It was then that she allegedly tried to stop the Prime Minister hosting a COVID crisis meeting to deal instead with a newspaper report claiming she wanted to get rid of their beloved Jack Russell Cross, Dylan. And I will point out that Dylan is spelled D-I-L-Y-N. I have seen many spellings of the name Dylan, but not that one before. I suppose it's extra classy and sophisticated. Cummings forced Johnson to overrule his fiancée, it was claimed. He told Number 10 officials to block any phone calls from Simons to the Prime Minister about the dog. And he gave orders for Simons' official protest about the news report about Dylan to be burned. Simons was said to be livid at a report in the Times which claimed that she no longer liked the animal. She went on Twitter to denounce it, saying, "Total load of crap. There has never been a healthier, happier, and more loved dog than Dylan." That is quite a claim, I must say. The dispute with Cummings and Kane flared when Simons apparently asked Kane to make a formal complaint to the Times via the press watchdog IPSO. He refused to do so, pointing out that a COVID crisis meeting was about to take place in Number 10 that day. Simons is understood to have contacted officials in Johnson's office and told them to scrap the coronavirus meeting because she wanted the Prime Minister to help her pursue her complaint with the Times. When Cummings found out, sources said, he stormed into Johnson's office and told him to go ahead with the meeting, which took place as planned. An insider claimed, "We were dealing with the extraordinary chaos of COVID, and Kerry," I'm not going to repeat this word, "the PM's Downing Street private office for a whole day, all over something trivial about her dog." The appointment of Allegra Stratton as Mr. Johnson's official number 10 TV spokesman was a key factor in the turmoil that has engulfed the top of government. Insiders say the Whitehall interview panel in charge of the appointment recommended another candidate. However, Johnson allegedly said, "Forget the process. I'm giving the job to Allegra. I've got to do this because if I don't, Kerry will go effing crackers about it." And Allegra, she's not really up to the job. This is from The Guardian, Saturday. "The woman appointed by Boris Johnson to lead his daily press operations was left in tears on Saturday after she claimed to have been the subject of negative briefings by a former number 10 official who resigned last week and made a dramatic exit from Downing Street. In an extraordinary escalation of feuding involving new and departing aides to Johnson, friends of Allegra Stratton, the new press secretary to the Prime Minister, said she had been in tears all morning as a result of what she believed were critical briefings by Johnson's former director of communications, Lee Kane. So who is Allegra Stratton? Well, she is 40 years old this month. She attended Emmanuel College, Cambridge, where she read archaeology and anthropology. She worked as a producer for the BBC on the foreign desk at the Times and wrote for The Independent and The New Statesman. She then joined The Guardian as a political correspondent, presenting the newspaper's Politics Weekly podcast with journalist Tom Clark. She returned to the BBC in 2012 as political editor of Newsnight, replacing Michael Crick, who left to become a political correspondent for Channel 4. Now, this is quite interesting. In May the same year, she faced criticism for a Newsnight interview with a single mother who was claiming housing benefit. The interviewee described feeling humiliated by Stratton, who misrepresented her as unemployed. Private Eye magazine reported that Stratton had chosen the single mother over several other interviewees offered, including a couple with 4 children who had lost their jobs and faced homelessness. Following an official complaint to the BBC's editorial complaints unit, a correction and apology was issued in August. So she became the national editor of ITV News in 2015. She made her first appearance on ITV's News at 10 in January 2016. And in April 2020, she quit ITV News to become Director of Strategic Communications at the Treasury under Chancellor Rishi Sunak. 6 months later, she became the Downing Street Press Secretary. Okay, so, and she's married to James Forsyth, political editor of The Spectator magazine. I used to be a political reporter, and you get phone calls all the time that so-and-so in your party is worthless. Oh, and people are saying that the leader is not up to snuff. Oh, and there's some sort of rebellion brewing. And she knows this. She knows this. So apparently someone was briefing against her, and she spent the morning in tears. So we have this situation where Boris Johnson, who has been power mad for a very long time, is now about to lose it all because let's say, 32-year-old posh bint / PR spiv, Kerry Simons, he's being led around by the nose by her, a woman whose knickers are continually in a twist. This is a woman who's never had a serious job in the world. She left the Conservative Party in 2018 as head of communications under a cloud, it would appear. Then she worked for some ocean conservation charity. Well, I don't know. She's sleeping with the boss. It's that simple, really. A devastating op-ed piece in the Mail on Sunday from Dan Hodges. The Dom Cummings era is over, the minister told me, but if we're going to replace it with the Kerry Simons era, we're fucked. The environment, transgender rights, if that's what we're going to be on about, our coalition is going to fall apart. It's not what our voters want to hear. We're going to lose a lot of seats. To people watching from beyond the plexiglass screen encasing Britain's political class, the events of the past few days look like a bad reality TV show. In fact, it's looked like that to those on the inside. I feel as if I've been watching an episode of Jeremy Kyle when distraught Tory MP complained to me. Let's go back to how Boris Johnson became Prime Minister. I mean, the Tories were in very serious trouble because Theresa May had been such a disaster as leader. And Boris Johnson appealed to Labour voters, particularly in the North, people who had never voted for the Conservative Party, by campaigning against the identity politics of the Labour Party, and I suppose the identity politics of the Liberal Democrats, who were pretty much wiped out. So there's this woman who happens to be sleeping with the man who becomes the Prime Minister, and animals, wind farm, transsexuals. Yeah. And don't be mean to women ever, because they'll burst into tears, and we can't have that. Talk about a lack of judgment, just extraordinary lack of judgment. Abigail Shrier, whose book, Irreversible Damage, I praised to the skies 2 weeks ago, is back in the news again. This is from the Daily Wire. On Saturday, the day after Target announced that it would reverse its decision to remove the book Irreversible Damage by Abigail Shrier, which is critical of the transgender movement, from its online store, an English professor at UC Berkeley urged her followers to steal the book and burn it. Grace Lavery tweeted, quote, "Since some people have misunderstood my tone and censorship is an important matter, and as a public educator, I have a duty to be precise. Let me clarify. I do not advocate defacing library books. I do encourage followers to steal Abigail Shrier's book and burn it on a pyre," unquote. "Please make sure you use a safe pyre and that you have an extinguisher to hand," she continued. "Be safe when you are burning books. Remember, all you're doing is removing a commodity from circulation, much as one might destroy a contaminated crop, or take action if a distributor failed to do so." Okay, I went to Grace Lavery's Twitter account, and I also discovered the Twitter account of Grace Lavery's husband, who is called Daniel Lavery. As far as I am able to ascertain, Grace Lavery was born a man, wrongly assigned at birth, as they say, and is now a woman. And her husband, Daniel Lavery, was born a woman, wrongly assigned as a woman at birth, and is now a man. They are both insane. I mentioned in my review of Abigail Shrier's book that she is far more sympathetic to transsexual people than I am. I would just explain that for us to accept that such a thing is possible, it is opening Pandora's box. It's not as if these people like Grace and Daniel Lavery are in any way cognizant of the fact of how radical they are. The demands just keep coming and coming and coming and coming, essentially that women should shut up, the so-called TERFs. You know that old song, "Anything you can do, I can do better"? It sort of goes back and forth between the men and the women, or the girls and the boys. But that's what we're hearing now, that anything that women can do, men can do better if they are women. Men can menstruate. They can conceive children and deliver children. And if you deny this, you're in serious trouble. And strangely enough, given that the feminist movement was pretty much taken over shortly after its inception, and I'm talking about the second wave, Betty Friedan and all that, by lesbians are now pretty much persona non grata in the movement that they largely founded. for all sorts of reasons that simply make no sense at all. This fellow Daniel Lavery, you just have to look at the pictures of him. This is obviously a woman's face, you know. And okay, this is from November the 14th, and there's two pictures. Big news: our dog sling arrived, and Bond's feet will not have to touch the ground until spring. This dog is going to be carried about like a baby. I'm not going to repeat any of the stuff that Grace Lavery has to say because it scares me. Okay? It scares me because I believe, as I stated before, that insanity is a communicable disease. What does this person actually teach at UC Berkeley? Let's see. Oh, the English department. I've got a pretty good idea of the type of, say, academic publications this person would have, assuming there are any. So, Abigail Schreier writes today in the Wall Street Journal, I never thought book banning would be respectable in America, much less that I would be the target. But here we are. Last Thursday, Target stopped selling my book, Irreversible Damage, in response to 2 Twitter complaints. One of them was, I think the trans community deserves a response from at Target as to why they're selling this book about the transgender epidemic sweeping the country. Harmful rhetoric, harmful products pulled from the shelves. That's what you do. That's a caricature of my view, she says. I think mature adults should have the freedom to undergo medical transition, but teenagers are another matter. Social contagions exist, and teen girls are particularly susceptible to them. The book takes a hard look at whether the sudden spike in transgender identification among teen girls is yet another social contagion to befall girls who, in another era, might have fallen prey to anorexia or bulimia. Many transgender adults, including some I interviewed for the book, agree that teen girls are undergoing medical transition too fast with too little oversight. Others disagree and have written books. Amid a sea of material unskeptically promoting medical transition for teenage girls, there's one book that investigates this phenomenon and urges cautions. Let's see. Abigail Schreier's book is a dangerous polemic with the goal of making people not trans Chase Strangio, the American Civil Liberties Union's deputy director for transgender justice, tweeted Friday. I think of all the times and ways I was told it's always personal. As I like to say, for these people, the personal is not only the political, it's the sociological as well. I think of all the times and ways I was told my transness wasn't real and the daily toll it takes. We have to fight these ideas which are leading to the criminalization of trans life again, unquote. No one's criminalizing trans life. Stopping the circulation of this book and these ideas is 100% a hill I will die on. You read that right. Some in today's ACLU favor book banning race. The ACLU, and they have a special transgender department. So I hope Abigail Schreier is holding up under this assault. I see, she's on Tucker Carlson's show tonight. I suppose she's already spoken. As I said in my review, she is a well-bred, sensible Jewish woman, and she has all these fancy degrees from Oxford and JD from Yale. She's a very intelligent woman, and this is the kind of this is the way that we live now in North America. So, and to end the show on a, I hope, hilarious note, let's talk about Anita Sarkeesian. Do you remember that woman? How many years ago was it that we learned that apparently Link saving Zelda the princess was a deeply serious topic that we should all furrow our brows over. Male characters in video games saving female characters. Yeah. Yes, and Anita has devoted her life to this noble work. She was laughed at over the weekend for saying something stupid, which she does all the time. This is from Bounding into Comics. Spencer Bakuli. Anita Sarkeesian has once again sparked a wave of discourse after the notorious feminist media critic cried foul and played the victim after receiving pushback against a complaint she made against boob armor in The Mandalorian. Yeah, boob armor. Again, did I not read? Oh, before we get into boob armor, let's talk more about The Mandalorian, because that's a subject that very serious people take very seriously. This is a tweet which was made yesterday, since deleted, from the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. We meet tomorrow for our first ever all-virtual General Assembly. How many Baby Yoda gifts do you think we'll post during USCCB 20? More than 5 or less than 5? Yep, that's what America's spiritual guardians of Catholicism, that's what's really important to them. Baby Yoda and the Mandalorian. I mean, religion, it's really old. I mean, in this case, it's like 2,000 years old, and you can't expect people to stay interested in that. Maybe they could bring in some new characters to, Jesus's story. Maybe some, like cute, like a talking little freak, like Baby Yoda. Maybe that would bring the kids back. Anyway, let's go back to Anita Sarkeesian. While this latest season of The Mandalorian has thus far shown numerous moments worthy of fan excitement, etc. Few events in the second season have enjoyed as big a fan reaction as the return of fan favorite Mandalorian Bo-Katan Kryze, making her first appearance. Are they gendering this robot? Bo-Katan appears along newly introduced Mandalorians Koska Reeves and Axe Woves, clad in their unique Mandalorian armors and offering Din Djarin information on the Jedi in exchange for his assistance in raiding an Imperial vessel. While most fans agreed that the appearance of the fully armored Mandalorian trio was a highlight of the episode, Sarkeesian took issue with how Bo-Katan and Koska's armors were designed to allow room for their chests. Lady Mandalorians have boob armor? Asked Sarkeesian. Oh, come on. Seriously? Unsurprisingly, Sarkeesian's take received massive amounts of pushback, with many fans noting that the armor wasn't boob armor, but rather just armor made specifically for the female body, and asserting that the critics seem to be just looking for an issue to be upset about. Looking at the three, seeing how he had similar plating that's flat to his chest is telling that this chest armor is just made to contour to their chest, observed at Super Shenko, more so than made for sexual intent, as the women there have protruding chests versus the men there. Well, I guess if you continually push the line that men and women are the same, then you're going to see women in armor versus men versus armor. Well, no, wait a minute, their armor's different. That's because women have breasts. Men have breasts too. Yes, men do have breasts. Yeah, you got me there. But they're flat. In response to one user who sarcastically replied to Anita, yes, it's terribly sexist to cater to women's needs in combat armor, author and U.S. Army Iraq War combat veteran Ryan Lee Dosty noted how in real life, the real problem for female soldiers' gear is in fact how the sappy plates are flat and smash against our breasts and flatten them, and it's so uncomfortable. In the trans community, they call this binding, and it's very, very popular for the female to male trans people. As Abigail Schreier points out in her book, it is exceedingly destructive physiologically, this binding. Okay. Oh, yes. Gamma the Raptor, or Raptor Gamma, said, it's almost like 50% of the planet have these fleshy mounds on our chest that hurt if they are squished too hard. Yeah, how about that? Disney Star Wars is dumb. That is an actual website. It weighs in on Anita Sarkeesian. And yeah, there's a lot of posts on this site. Anita Sarkeesian struggles with basic anatomy and geometry. Let's see. Anita Sarkeesian is a feminist something or other, famous for being a feminist something or other. Well, she's not too happy with the armor for the Wamandalorians. This happened before, back in 2015, when someone remarked on the Star Wars Facebook account that Phasma's armor didn't look very feminine, despite marketing proudly bragging about the femaleness of this stormtrooper character. The Star Wars Facebook account responded that it didn't have to look feminine just because it was on a female. So basic anatomy and geometry were ignored in favor of feminist hyperbole, just as it is here. But we can help Anita by taking her through some remedial slides to help her understand that anatomy and geometry actually override worthless hyperbole. First, we have an image of an average woman. Here we have the side view of a male Mandalorian wearing his armor. Now, what happens if we take the male Mandalorian's chest piece and place it on the female? Do you see the problem? Not only is the male chest plate not large enough to accommodate the geometry of the female breasts, but the male pectorals are also higher up on the body and closer to the shoulders. The male chest plate not only wouldn't fit properly on a female and be uncomfortable, but it would probably hurt as well. Forcing a fit might be reminiscent of Chinese foot binding. But the SJW concept of perfect gender equality overrides common sense and reality. Feminists are so concerned about anything that might moderately accommodate the male gaze that anything even remotely resembling the female form sends them into a tizzy. It could be that feminists are just angry that they're not men, but I digress. This probably shouldn't come as a surprise, given that many SJW women apparently don't know where their vaginas are located. Yes, that's an actual thing, okay, from the New York Post. I won't go into more detail about that, but I will talk about this, that apparently Hal Hickel, who is animation director for The Mandalorian, and I guess it's all Mandalorian all the time here on the KMG Show today. The same site, Disney Star Wars is Dumb, says enemies lists and re-education camps are the stuff of wet dreams for every fringe leftist. It's why their promised utopias always end in that kind of atrocity. Industrial Light and Magic animation director for The Mandalorian, Hal Hickel, the brainiac who claims that Star Wars is not about war, is calling for a federal mask mandate. 2 tweets, one after the other. I'm going to read them verbatim. We need a federal mask mandate with penalties, not monetary penalties that just punishes the poor and stupid and lets the rich and stupid off the hook. Instead, they should be made to watch hours of live stream from an ICU, folks being intubated, folks dying, hours of it. All caps and the 3 words separated by full stops. Supervised. No phones allowed. Just watch people fucking dying so they can see the cost of their selfishness. Is there any living with these people? Increasingly, it seems to me that there is not any living with these people, that they need to be made whole or at least put under control, or they have to be avoided totally. Anyway, let's have a final look at the chat. Chad Chaslin, our valiant moderator, says the same abortionist got mad at Baby Yoda for eating a reptile woman's eggs. Yes, the word genocide was used. People are talking about Roosh. Okay. He's Armenian-Iranian, very based, says Hikmah Warrior. Goose says, imagine being Armenian and working for the Young Turks. I can't remember that woman's name, but see, historical consciousness has pretty much disappeared, so I'm assuming this woman, whose name escapes me for the moment, that she believes the world started in, say, 2000. So what the Young Turks used to mean, and I can hardly believe that Cenk Uygur, or however his name is pronounced, didn't choose that name knowing full well what it meant. We need to open the windows of the church, the Mandalorian. I don't know. I haven't seen the show. I don't like Star Wars. They're robots, and you can't see their faces. At least, with RoboCop, you could see his eyes, and there was his chin and all that. I suppose it goes to prove just how desperate old school Star Wars fans are for something which is not totally paused. Kasparian, is her name Anna Kasparian? I believe so. Putin, Lukashenko, and Erdogan may be stealing, but they will never touch the nuclear family, says Hikmah Warrior. Head McNeck says, I'm really beginning to enjoy how ridiculous our ruling class is. The civilizational collapse is approaching levels of overt retardation that shouldn't even be possible, and my smile is ear to ear. Eche Lux, well, haven't heard from you for a while. Brent Studemeyer, they often upload and then delete albums, such as The Life of Vaporware. This is why I try to download albums I like. You never know when they will evaporate. Just so. That is the show for tonight. What's coming up on Theater Thursday? Just give me a second here. Oh, yes. A movie from 1932. A movie which made a big stir in the United States when it came out. It's called I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang, starring Paul Muni, directed by Mervyn Leroy, and is based on a true story of Southern justice. We've got another old Hollywood classic coming up on November 26th, Frank Capra's Meet John Doe, starring the great Gary Cooper and Barbara Stanwyck. And on the book club this week, we're going to discuss the war between Poland and Russia in 1920. Norman Davis's White Eagle, Red Star. And November 27th, a book by Claire Ellis called The Blackening of Europe 1. So I will be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. If you like the show or any part of it, I'd appreciate it if you would click on the like button, subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not already done so. If you would like to donate to the live stream, my PayPal account is Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. If you're Canadian and would like to send a donation, you can also send it to me directly at interact@kevingrace@shaw.ca. And I shall leave you with this: in these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear listeners and viewers, manage to find a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.